Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here and staying on and carrying on to the annual general meeting from the opening this morning. Doug and I were talking about what we could do and what we could talk about this afternoon. So we thought we might run through all the speeches again. But then Doug said, then what else? How are we going to fill the time in? And then Doug offered to go through the whole list of people he should recognise. But really, I'd like to say how wonderful I thought the opening was this morning. It was one of the highlights of my life to be involved with such a great project and to see the enthusiasm and to hear the stories of people this morning made me realise that just how very, very fortunate we are in this country to have the opportunity to build an edifice like the one we have here, have the opportunity to talk to government and to thank them for what they did, and had the opportunity to see a good marriage of private enterprise and government to build that building, and as I said this morning, to bring it in on time and to budget was a remarkable event. And it doesn't happen too often, unfortunately, in our society. And it was remarkable because of all the people that were involved. And I'd like to thank once again my board colleagues, your board, who spent a lot of time and effort in the planning and the worrying about the project, and to Mike Fitzpatrick, who I said this morning was the chair of that very, very important committee of the board that saw this project through to finality. It was a job well done. One of the things that were concerning everybody on the board was we were the guarantor of that project. We had a contingent liability to finish that project if it had a cost overrun, if something went wrong and it couldn't be built and we had to find money from elsewhere. And so we were really on the line, and that's one of the reasons why I'm glad it's over. But also we took on a huge responsibility where everybody pulled their weight, worked very, very well, free from strife and discord from the people working on the job right up to the supervisors and architects and the like. So it's a job well done. So I guess the good news is that there's not going to be long speeches, and I think we've already strained your patience with speeches, but I just want to say that WeHi is in very good shape. Our finances are in good shape. We have good management. Doug is doing a great job. The board is very supportive and appreciate what he's doing. You should too. We are the preeminent research organisation in Australia, if not the world, but certainly Australia. And I know that you're not going to rest on your laurels because of that. As my wife says, don't get a big head about that. Get down and make sure that you can maintain that position. The thing that should concern all of us, I think, as Australians, is what's going to happen to our society in the years ahead. And we are suffering the disease that a lot of developed countries around the world are suffering, some in more advanced phases than ours, where we have an aging population, which means that the revenue base for supplying the services to the total population is either static or shrinking, and people are getting older and demanding more services. In fact, the natural outcome is that there will be less services. And of course, this can be corrected. There are many ways that governments are doing that, either through immigration, getting more workplace participation, particularly from women. It used to be a nice thing to do and a morally correct thing to do to give women equal opportunity to men. That's all changed. It's not just a nice thing to do, it's an economic imperative that we do that in our country and in developed countries. And we need to look very carefully at migration. We need to look very carefully at our birth rate. All those things that need to be done to make sure that we can maintain the standard of living that we have now and we want in the future. Why is this important? It's important for us because we are so very dependent on government support and government payments to us. And that is why you have seen the management, the executive and the board of WEHI in the last few years under a committee as well, headed up by Chris Thomas, to look at ways and means that we can get out and get fundraising on a proper, professional and continuous basis so that we can grow our corpus, so that we can increase our cash flow from private funds rather than government funds, so that we can future-proof this organisation for the hard times that are going to come because we've been so successful as a nation that we are going to have the problems of how to continue and to maintain our revenue base because of that. And of course, medical research is so absolutely necessary to control the costs that come from an ageing population. In fact, the combination of successful medical research and technology is the only way that we can control those costs. So once again, thank you very much for being here. I will now like to move on to the formal part of the AGM and to ask Roger Mail to talk on the financial position and statements of income and cash flows and reports of the directors and auditors for the year ending the 30th of June. Roger?
Thanks, Leon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to ask you to receive the Statement of Financial Position, the Statement of Comprehensive Income, the Statement of Cash Flows, and the reports of the Directors and the Auditor in respect of the year ended 30th of June 2012. That's quite a mouthful. The year 2012 at a glance is shown on pages 74 and 75 of the hard copy of the annual report that has been handed out. And we've also provided a CD-ROM in that package, which will give you the full financial statements and the directors' reports. The net surplus of the year was $29 million, and that's slightly down, it's a little bit more than slightly. It's $55 million last year, and it's partly due to the variation in the building capital grants and also in the level of the bequests that we received during the year. We're very conscious of the need to preserve our investment capital base at this time of great economic uncertainty, and the last valuation a few days ago was worth $180 million. And that's about the same as last year. I think it was $182 million last year, but we did make a contribution to the building fund. It is appropriate to thank those members of the financial community who so graciously give of their time to sit on the investment committee, and I notice that a few of them are here today, which is most pleasing. Infrastructure funding is critical, and we're pleased to acknowledge the support of the Victorian Government and the Federal Government. The external audit is performed by Deloitte, and as has been the case for many, many years, it went smoothly and there are no issues of major concern. Members of the Institute, I now move that the Statement of Financial Position, the Statement of Comprehensive Income and the Statement of Cash Flows and the reports of the Directors and the Auditor for the year ended 30th of June 2012 be received and adopted. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you very much, Kathy. Thank you. Are there any questions? I'll now put the motion. All members in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Leon.
Thanks, Roger. Thank you very much. I think that was a pretty good picture, particularly the corpus, which hasn't changed much, even though there's been quite heavy calls on it in the last year. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the annual report for the year ending the 30th of June 2012. You should have all received, all members should have all received copies of the annual report. Can I please have a motion for its adoption? Is there a proposal to that? Seconder? Okay. Can I have a motion, a vote? Those in favour? Against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I'll now ask Doug to give us the Director's report. Doug, thank you.
Thanks very much, Leon. Very much like Leon, I think there was enough said this morning and over lunch. It's been a fantastic day. Today really marks the end point of a 7-year planning and construction phase that has been an enormous piece of business for the Institute to carry out. I'd like to very much echo Leon's thoughts and thank every one of the staff and board members that have contributed to what has been an outstanding project. As I said at the speeches, Mike and Leon gave me one piece of advice when I took over from Suzanne. So when I took over from Suzanne, there was a big hole in the ground just to the south of our building, where the new building is. And I think Mike and Leon both looked me in the eye and said, there's only one thing you need to do, and that is change nothing. Anything you change is going to cost us money. And as director, I want you to change nothing. And I think there were relatively few changes, and we were delighted to see that the cost didn't blow out. So the board has been enormously supportive to me. And I think the thing that I was most pleased about, especially with the erection of the new building, was that within, I think, 3 or 4 days of the building being completed and ready to move in, there were experiments being done. And that, I think, is a testament to the logistics and the organisation and the patience of the staff. And I think that is exactly what our members would want and exactly what the community would want, that we get back down to the business of making discoveries. So that's been very exciting, and I think the message that I had this morning was that buildings don't make discoveries, people do. And the reason this institute's in such good shape is the outstanding quality and talent of the staff and the students. I think the board can take an enormous amount of pride in its workforce and the passion that we have, and also in the support that we get from our members and families in the community. So I want to thank you all for making my job so very easy. From a scientific viewpoint, I think the last 12 months has been outstanding, both in terms of the basic research that we've carried out, making the sorts of discoveries that change the way we think about the world, that excite other scientists. But also, importantly, we have a record number of our discoveries that are being translated into the clinic and are part of clinical trials. I think the last count was somewhere between 45 and 50 separate clinical trials being carried out around the world based on discoveries that have come out of this institute. And that is fantastic when we think about the clinical trials that are going on in the Royal Melbourne Hospital with new cancer agents that are being used on patients that have failed 4, 5, 6 rounds of different chemotherapy and are still alive many months and years after they started on those trials. If we think about the 3 different vaccine trials for malaria or the vaccine trial for celiac disease, these are why we work in medical research and not basic biology, because we want to make a difference in the community. I think it's also been pleasing, and I'll talk about this again next year, but the Victoria Prize is awarded each year for the outstanding life scientist in Victoria. This was awarded by Louise Asher yesterday, and obviously a year ago, again, in the last 2 years, Institute scientists have won the prize. Andreas Strasser last year, and I think I was absolutely delighted yesterday to dash down into the city during the symposium and hear that Terry Speed had won the Victorian Life Scientist Prize for 2012. The thing that I think is wonderful about that is that it typifies what 21st century science is about. The idea that somebody who trained in mathematics and statistics is being honoured for their contribution to medical research, I think is a sign of the times. And any of you kids out there doing maths in high school, we want you to come and work in the Institute, because you've got you as well in the front row, Eleanor. Study hard and come and do maths. It's really important, and that was something that was fantastic. And I also just wanted to say that the last couple of weeks has been fantastically exciting from a science viewpoint. And I told the board 2 weeks ago in the last board meeting that in the last couple of weeks we've had 2 papers accepted in Cell, a paper accepted in Nature, and I understand today a paper accepted in Nature Structural Biology. That is just fantastic and really typifies that we have people working at the cutting edge and working in those cases, I know, for 3, 4, 5, 6 years to get a single publication out. You guys are very inspirational, and you're what keeps me going. So I don't really want to say anything else except once again to thank all the members of the community here, the WEHI members and the staff and students for making this an exceptional job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug, for that report. Well, you've heard Doug's report. You've had the annual report in your hands for a few weeks. We now move on to a relatively new part of our agenda, and that's questions from members. Are there any questions that you'd like to direct at me or to Doug?
Nothing on climate change. Ashley Dunn, Jim Godding, you have also been banned from asking questions. You've been red carded.
I can give you a little dissertation on climate change if you like, Doug.
And to answer Jim's question from a year and a half ago, which was how much does it cost per publication now? It costs about $380,000 per paper. And I think and that number's gone up. And I think the reason that's gone up is a trend that I've seen in science over the last 20 years, and that is the amount of information and work that go into each paper has increased massively. When I started out, it was possible for a young honours student working with their supervisor perhaps to publish 2 or 3 papers a year. Now you require teams of individuals that are willing, in many cases, to subvert their own egos and work together to produce a body of work that is, I think, truly spectacular. And that's why I was so delighted about the papers in Cell Science and Nature, but not just in those journals. It really takes a special sort of person to make discoveries and package them up in a way that's interesting to the scientific community. There you go. I've answered your question, Jim, 2 years late.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for that answer 2 years late, Doug, but we will hope to be a bit more prompt next time. So the rest of the agenda items are really concerning Doug, so I'll hand over to Doug to take us through that.
You're going to present the Burnett Prize
Yeah,
when
I'll
I
stick
announce, so
around.
you can
Yeah.
stick there and
All
then
right,
we'll sit
a
you
little
down.
while.
All right,
Okay.
that's great. Look, the Burnett Prize is a very important prize that honours Sir Macfarlane Burnett, previous director of the Institute, and recognises not a young scientist, but a scientist in the prime of their career. The reason I don't say a young scientist is that I don't like the use of that language anymore. There's a prize that the NIH has just announced, a $100,000 a year prize called the Luery Prize, and they have this prize for an outstanding young biomedical researcher. The cut-off age for that prize is 52. Being a 48-year-old, I am very flattered that I might be considered young, but really there is no use of the word young that can include somebody of 52. So the Burnett Prize, in my mind, is a prize that recognises researchers at the Institute who are at the peak of their game, the most productive years of their life, which we hope will continue at that high plateau for many years, even out to 52. It's been won by fabulous researchers that have committed, in many cases, their whole careers to the Institute. And it's my absolute pleasure to announce that the 2012 Burnett Prize winner is Dr. Jeff Babin. Jeff. I want a hug. Jeff is one of the lab heads we've appointed in the last few years, a man absolutely, as I said, at the top of his game from a research viewpoint. Somebody who is willing to tackle difficult problems, to tackle them with verve and create really beautiful pieces of science. I know also that he is an outstanding supervisor and mentor. He may be the most embarrassing father in the world, Eleanor, but he's an outstanding supervisor and mentor, and somebody we're very proud to have as part of the Institute. And I know Jeff wants to say a few words, so thank you.
Thanks very much. It's really very kind. I'm incredibly humbled to get this award. It's named after Macfarlane Burnett, obviously. I mean, that's an incredible thing in itself. There's also been some amazing people that have won this award in the past, two of which, well, just quickly, I've been at WEHI for 9 years, and I've spent the whole 9 years working on one family of molecules, and that family of molecules, most of you or half of you will know, are called SOX proteins. They were discovered by two previous winners of this award, Doug Hilton, the director, and Robin Starr, and without their work, none of this would have happened, obviously. So I'm very grateful to them. I'm very grateful to WEHI. I've always felt privileged to be a scientist. I think being a scientist is the most amazing career in the world. I don't know anybody outside of science that looks forward to going into work every day the way that we do. WEHI is a fantastic place to do science. I'm luckier than most in WEHI because I work in two divisions, one of which is headed by Peter Coleman, who co-invented the anti-flu drug Relenza, the other of which is headed by Nick Nicola, who co-discovered the CSFs. I can't think of anywhere else in the world where you would have two such tangible examples of science outcomes as those two people, as what they've achieved. Both of them are my scientific heroes, definitely. They teach you, without saying it, that the key to good science is technical expertise. So find something to do and become very good at it. It sounds obvious, but it's a lesson that I've really taken to heart. Nick especially has been involved in every step of all of the work that I've done, and to him I owe a special thanks. I've also been very privileged to have great people working with me on this project over the last 8 years. It's probably unfair to single anybody out, but I'm going to do it anyway and single out James Murphy and Tom Lactution, who have been my most long-standing collaborators and helpers on this work, and thanks to you guys. Finally, WeHi is a great place and it's a great place for many reasons, one of which is that your peers are very inspirational, and 3 of my best friends work here. We talk about science all the time, Ross Dickens, Peter Zabatar, Doug Fairley. Without the conversations that we have together, life in science wouldn't be as enjoyable. Finally, WeHi is a great place for all of those reasons, but if you're really lucky, you get to meet your wife at WeHi, which is what happened to me. And I'm extremely grateful to Nadia, not just in a nebulous, she's very supportive kind of way, but in a very tangible, I don't understand these results, I can't do this technique, can you do it for me and work it out for me kind of direct outputs kind of way. So thank you to that, and thank you once again. I'm truly very, very humbled.
That's great, Jeff, thanks. I met my wife here as well, and it's the only place you can meet girls if you're working in the lab 18 hours a day. Reminds me of another Don Metcalf story that I started when I was 20, 21, something like that here, and came from Monash to do honours, and walked in, I think I had pink sneakers and jeans, and walked into Don's office, and at that stage he was smoking a cigar. I'm not allowed to say that if the Cancer Council's here, but Don was smoking a cigar. And he said to me, Doug, I hope you've had a good holiday. And I thought, what a lovely guy, thinking about my mental health and asking. And then he said, because it's the last one you'll have in 10 years. And so meeting girls at work was the only place I was ever going to meet a girl. And I suspect it was the same for Jeff. We'll move on to our second award, and that is the Seminar Award. One of the most important things in science is to be able to communicate your results so that you can hold them up to judgment by your peers, but also so that you can stimulate others to take your data and move it to the next step. We are always dependent on that. We have 2 seminar awards. One is for postdoctoral scientists and one is for our PhD students, our graduate students. And it is my absolute pleasure to announce the winner of the Postdoctoral Science Seminar Award, and that is Dr. Delphine Marino from the Molecular Genetics of Cancer Division for her seminar, BIM Isoforms 3 Bullets to Kill a Cancer Cell. Delphine. Do you want to do a photo? Okay. Congratulations, Delphine. And this year we have 2 prizes for the Student Seminar Award, joint winners, because the panel was terribly impressed with both of them and couldn't split the quality of those seminars. And I actually think it's getting harder and harder each year to judge the seminar prizes. The sophistication and ability of the students to communicate their data is truly impressive. This year's 2 winners are Dr. Stephanie Grabo from the Molecular Genetics of Cancer Division. Were you selecting them, Suzanne? Were you selecting the prizes? They're all Molecular Genetics of Cancer Division. It's an outrage. 2 and her seminar was examining the requirement of endogenous pro-survival BCL2 family members in lymphoma development. It was a fabulous seminar, Stephanie. and Dr. Andrew Q from the Molecular Medicine Division, Molecular Medicine Division for his seminar, The Role of HBO1 During Embryonic Development. And I'd like to ask Stephanie and Andrew to come up. Well done, Stephanie. Well done, both of you. Have you written up yet, Andrew? That's good. I just want to check, because the Dean of Medicine's over there, and completion rates are important. Well done. Okay, just let me work out where we're heading with this. Good. The third prize that we have each year, and you'll see this around the institute. Not only is an institute like this with its big white walls a fantastic place for exhibiting art, but also the experiments that we do in the laboratory often yield images of really fabulous beauty. And so we have an Art in Science prize. And again, this year there were some outstanding images, but the standout was an image by Dr. Anna Rios from the ACRF Stem Cells and Cancer Division. You can announce it in French, but in English, I went to East Doncaster High School and I did French for 4 years, and let me tell you, I'm not going to open my mouth and try to speak French. But the English version is, "This is not a cactus." Come on up. And of course, you have to say it in French.
Ah, yeah, of course.
Yeah, you can use the microphone.
Okay, so the name is Ceci n'est pas un cactus, so this is not a cactus, obviously. So it's a 3D reconstruction of a terminal bud of one of the ducts that constitutes the mammary gland. So I acquired this data with a confocal microscope that we have here at WEI, and I did the picture with a 3D software. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
And the reason that I have a particular personal interest in the Art in Science Prize is that the entries to the Art in Science Prize form the basis of Christmas cards. And I never thought in my life that I would write Christmas cards. That I'm not very good at those sort of things at home. But when I took over as director, Suzanne had a Christmas card list. It was a file of several hundred names. So each time it comes to Christmas in the next few weeks, I get given mountains of cards and have to try and duplicate Suzanne's graciousness in sending cards out. So if you don't get a Christmas card, just remember it's me sending them, and I'm not very good at those sort of things. Okay. I would like to ask our Treasurer to come back to the podium, Mr. Roger Mail, because we now have a number of acknowledgements of extraordinary service to the Institute. And the first of those is for our retiring, effectively Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Murray Jeffs. And I'd like to ask Roger to say some words and to make a presentation to Murray.
I have a most pleasant task to perform, and that's to make a presentation to a very, very good friend and work colleague, Murray Jeffs. Murray will be retiring from WEHI in mid-December, and it is fortunate that we have a large auditorium here today, because I'd like to especially welcome Murray's wife, Anne, his mother, his sister, 4 children and 3 sets of in-laws. So, You would be aware that Murray is a great family man and thereby embodies the spirit that's right throughout WeHi. Murray left the stock exchange and joined WeHi some 16 years ago, and he came here as the Chief Financial Officer, and later on he became the Company Secretary to the board. Murray is a most popular staff member, competent, capable and caring. Always eager to help, he has been enormous assistance to me as well as to other staff and the other board members. I think Murray would acknowledge that he is a petrol head and he loves racing cars and boats. He has a permanent campsite at the Bathurst 1000, which is also a real family event. No doubt he'll have a lot more time to pursue this activity and others from 2013 onwards. Murray, we are going to miss you, and I wonder if you would please come over here. Thank you for 16 years of dedicated service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you all very much. It's been a great privilege to work here at the Institute. When I joined the Institute, I knew very little about science. 16 years later, I leave knowing very little about science. However, I leave with the greatest admiration for this wonderful institute, its researchers, its support staff, and its management, past and present. I'd like to thank the Institute's presidents, treasurers, directors, and board members that I've worked with for their support and for their vision for the Institute. Thank you also to my hard-working and dedicated staff who have made it such a pleasure to work here. In my position, I see firsthand the extraordinary generosity of the Institute's supporters who have allowed the Institute to tackle these major medical problems that face us all. It's extraordinary, the generosity and the foresight of these people. On a personal note, as Roger's mentioned, I'm absolutely delighted to have my mother, wife, 4 children, and one of my daughter-in-laws here today to share this with me. I intend to remain close to the Institute and to continue to take great pride in its future successes. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Murray. And I'd like to add just a personal note of thanks. Taking over as director, you come primarily with scientific qualifications rather than financial understanding. Murray has been a fantastic teacher, and I've very much appreciated your solidity, your care, and your prudence managing the Institute's finance. It's been a privilege to work with you, Murray. There are 3 other people that it's also a pleasure and a privilege to acknowledge. 3 people who I've worked with directly in many senses. The first of those people has worked directly with almost everybody in the Institute, and I think is as an important a person as anybody else in the last 25 years of creating the right sort of culture in this institute that allows discoveries to be made. Somebody we see every morning. My only criticism of this person is that she calls Don Metcalf Professor. And I thought once I might get to the lofty position of director I might be called professor as well, but it didn't happen. And I'm kind of glad about that because I still get called Love, which means a lot to me. And the person, I need not introduce this person to any staff member, but this person is Betty Bravo. You've got to wait here. You're so small, you're not going to hide behind the podium. Betty's going to wait here while I read the citation. Betty Bravo joined the Institute in February 1987 and has been an integral part of WeHi ever since. She's catering supervisor, well known throughout the Institute, and it's not an exaggeration to say that everybody in the Parkville campus knows who she is. And I'm not sure whether you know everybody's name, because most people all get Love. Yeah. It's like me saying mate, isn't it? Yeah. She greets everybody in the morning. She's always happy to spend some time chatting and listening to people and quite often understanding the problems they're bringing to work and getting them through the day. Betty's job really is second nature to her. She prepares morning tea and afternoon tea every day, takes care of catering events for the whole Institute. And even when the tea room was moved to a temporary location, which was like a dungeon, it was right in the bottom of the building when this floor was being renovated, she continued to create beverages and food for us with absolute grace and without complaint. I think the thing that I also love about Betty is that whenever we have events, and often when we don't, she brings in flowers from her garden. And in fact, one of the most touching things I saw was the Governor-General visiting here and was presented with a bunch of flowers that Betty had grown from her garden. And I think I can honestly say that was the highlight of the Governor-General's visit. And I think if she remembers anything from the visit, it's not going to be the wonderful science or the new building or anything like that. It's going to be a touch of humanity from somebody who's very special to us all. So Betty, thank you for 25 years of wonderful service. You mean a lot to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Billy. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Betty. The second person I want to mention is somebody who's not so well known, perhaps to the whole Institute, but somebody again who I met must have been nearly 20 years ago when I was doing experiments with Warren Alexander out at our facility at Kew. And I'd met a number of the staff out at Kew, but the person who was held in highest esteem by her staff members, almost in awe, both for her encyclopedic knowledge of animal husbandry and mice, but also because she was the person that ran a very, very special facility for this institute, and that was our germ-free facility. And I'm talking about Jill Carter. And Jill, I'd like you to come up as well, because I'm going to embarrass you while you're standing here. And Jill has one essential ingredient that's very similar to Betty, and that is she takes enormous pride in her work. She's an absolute professional, and I know that there are dozens of scientists in this room whose publications and insights have depended on Jill's stunning expertise and care. Keeping mice absolutely germ-free is an exceptionally difficult endeavour. It involves, they're almost mice like the bubble boy in the Seinfeld episode, the one that's in the big bubble, where you have to put your hands in and manipulate the cages, and that does take extraordinary proficiency. I'm going to read Jill's citation as well. The Institute was very fortunate to attract Jill Carter to Melbourne from a senior UK position 25 years ago. And do you still break for the English cricket team? No. Oh. That's good. Ashley Dunn, take note. Her desire to relocate to Australia was a wonderful opportunity for the Australian laboratory science community to get a fellow of the UK Institute of Animal Technology to come and migrate here and really make her life here was fantastic. Jill has fully participated in professional life of her part of the sector in the Australian Association for Laboratory Animal Science and was the recently retiring treasurer. The bulk of Jill's time, as I've said, at the Institute has been spent running the germ-free unit at Kew. This unit is unique in Australia, as well as it supplies valuable pedigree mice to our SPF barrier unit, which is our big production mouse facility. And so the work that Jill does very much dictates the quality of the animals that we all use in our experimental models of disease. Jill's integrated herself into the Australian lifestyle. We were very lucky that she married an Australian, which was great. She's purchased a cattle property near Newgie and for many years has been involved with her CFA. And as somebody who lives in the far eastern suburbs, within a few kilometres of where the Saturday fires burned a few years ago, I know how absolutely in debt we are to anybody who's involved in the CFA. Many thanks, Jill, for your wonderful contribution, and we hope we have a few more years left in you. I'm not going to kiss you, Graham. The final person we're here to acknowledge and thank is Graham Pratt. And again, Graham's somebody I've bumped into at different facilities where I've worked. I've been lucky enough to have not only done experimental work here, but also at Kew and at Bundoora. And Graham is one of those people that, again, it's been a privilege for me to work with. Graham is the sort of person that keeps the facilities running day in, day out. I'm going to read Graham's citation. Come up, Graham. I think standing in a brand new building, we sometimes forget that maintaining our infrastructure is such an important part of the quality of the science we do. Graham commenced with WeHi in March 1987, was instrumental in the upgrade of the Kew infrastructure. That was a building built in the early 1970s as a result of a donation from the Ramaciotti Trust. It's a big animal production facility in Kew. Maintaining that infrastructure through the 80s and 90s so that it was a facility that could generate high quality animals for 30 or 40 years was a wonderful piece of work that Graham led. Developed a strong skill set in construction and maintenance of sterile animal breeding facilities, and again, just like Jill's work, that is absolutely vital to almost every experiment that's been done in this institute. In 2001, following his contribution to the development of the Bundoora Biotechnology Facility, which is the facility we have in the business park at Latrobe, Graham was promoted to engineering supervisor and is presently responsible for overseeing engineering services at Bundoora, Kew and the Latrobe Central Animal House. His expertise was utilised in the recent redevelopment at Parkville, where he provided an enormous amount of input into the things we were trying to do here, the various central infrastructure and new technologies. Graham, you've got a lot of friends and colleagues here that have remarkable admiration for your skill and your capability, and we'd all like to thank you. Thank you. As is traditional, we like to end our annual general meetings on a high note and to highlight something that I think is unique to this institute, and that is not only do we, like many places around the world, make discoveries that are exciting, but we also have a group that's committed to explaining those discoveries to the public in a way that is very intuitive, that doesn't talk down to the public, but using both beautiful graphics but highly accurate graphics, portrays both the beauty and complexity of science. It's a pleasure to ask Drew Berry to talk us through his latest contribution to science communication. Drew.
Okay, it's
Nearly there.
my pleasure to show you all some of our latest productions. Every once in a while, we either produce content specifically for the Institute and the discoveries being made here, but we also often do collaborative work where we work with many organizations around the world to do large effort public outreach. And the project I'm about to play to now is really the biggest science education project we've been ever involved with. I'm really pleased it's finally running. What I'm going to do is going to play a little bit of a sample animation from that. Unfortunately, I don't have much time to show you what the nature of this interactive textbook is like. So the idea is we're trying to revolutionize the way biology and science is taught in classrooms. And it's going to be a new digital textbook for high school biology students and the interested public. And it's called Life on Earth. The project began as a collaboration between all of the group of us on the left-hand side there, and we spent a couple of years trying to raise the money, and fortunately we're now fully funded and we're underway as the start of this year. And the goal is to create a cultural landmark in science education featuring cutting-edge instructional media that present complex biological systems and functions with unprecedented ease of study and comprehension. We're publishing chapters as they're completed, and you can purchase this book for $1.99. It runs on the iPad, and this is compared to the $100 plus that you usually get charged for a high school biology textbook in the traditional printed format. And once you paid your $1.99, as chapters are released, it'll automatically update. And that $1.99, by the way, is really to raise funds for the edition 2 of this textbook. So the current edition, as it's currently, you can download it onto your iPad, has 8 chapters, including such topics as physiological systems, innate and adaptive immunity, vaccination, autoimmune disease, and we currently have case study chapters on topics like malaria, influenza, and cancer. So I hope you can see the influence WEHI is having on this development. So I'm going to play a brief animation from it. I really have to acknowledge, there's actually a list of about 30 to 40 organizations and people who contributed to this. I had, in retrospect, that was actually the most fun stage, was the fundraising. I had so many incredibly fancy dinners, top New York restaurants, meeting many amazing billionaires and philanthropic organizations. And I really got just such a pleasure out of meeting so many smart and dedicated people out there, and people are very passionate about science education. So anyway, I'll go ahead and play this animation. This is just a brief excerpt of the whole piece, and I'll be wandering around later, and I'm always wandering around with this rather battered and world-weary iPad. And so if you want to play, we also have loaner units if you want to take one away and have a play yourself, or buy it for $1.99. So let's begin with the animation. So we start with DNA, and this is from X-ray crystallography, so it's an accurate model of DNA. And it's jiggling and wiggling there because of the surrounding soup of molecules which I've stripped away so you can actually see something. Now, DNA is really quite tiny. It's about 2 nanometers across, 20 to 30 atoms across. But each one of the strands in each one of your cells is about 30 to 40 million nanometers long. So to keep it organized and to regulate access to the genetic code, it's wrapped around these proteins, which I've labeled purple here, called histones. Now, all of this field of view is a single strand of DNA. And this huge package of DNA is called a chromosome. And we'll come back to chromosomes in a minute. So we're pulling out, zooming away from that chromosome, out through a nuclear pore, which is like this gateway to this compartment that holds all the DNA called the nucleus. And all of this field of view is a whole semester's worth of biology. So we don't have time for that today. So you'll have to buy the textbook. This field of view is, if you look down a normal light microscope, and it's a living cell. It's been filmed under time lapse, so you can see it moving. The nuclear envelope breaks down. These pink purpley things are the chromosomes, those packages of DNA, and they go through this very striking motion, which seems to be very much focused on these zones, which I've added with these little red spots. They wriggle around, they move back and forth, and when the cell feels everything is ready to go, it rips apart the chromosomes. One set of DNA goes to one side, the other side gets the other set of DNA, identical copies of DNA, and the cell splits down the middle, creating 2 identical daughter cells. Now we're going to rewind and we're going to focus on the chromosomes, and I'll show you a visualization of it. Now this is the most technically complicated simulation I've ever created, and hundreds of papers went into this visualization. So here we are when those chromosomes line up in the middle of the cell, and we're just going to isolate just one chromosome and look at its structure. So this is one chromosome. These sausage-shaped things are the chromosomes. There's two strands of DNA. One strand of DNA is bundled up in one sausage, the other one's in the other sausage. These things that look like whiskers sticking out either side are the part of the dynamic scaffolding of the cell. They're called microtubules. But what we're going to focus on is this red region. It's called the kinetochore. It's a gigantic molecular machine. And it's so big, we've known about it for more than 100 years, and it's been an area of intense study. We know a lot about it. It's composed of about 200 different types of proteins, thousands of proteins in total. It does a number of roles, so as we discovered so far. It's obviously involved with the movement of the chromosomes, but we still have yet to work out exactly how it's achieving the movement. It's a signal broadcasting system. It's red here because it's sending out a stop signal. So it's able to send out through chemical signals and alert the rest of the cell its state of readiness for the separation of the chromosomes. It's able to grow these microtubules. Well, grow in shrinking microtubules. It's actually transiently couple onto them. It's also a mechanical tension sensing system. It's able to feel through mechanical tension the state of readiness and whether the chromosome is ready to be separated. And it's turning green here, representing it feels that everything's just right. And there's just one little last bit that's remaining red, and that's the signal broadcasting system, that stop signal broadcasting system. And it's mechanically walked away down the microtubules. This is how you work at the molecular scale. You are molecular clockwork. And one little last bit of molecular eye candy. These are the microtubules. Those orange guys are the courier molecules called kinesin, and they've got little protein packages on their back. And here are the dynein with their long legs walking in the opposite direction, carrying that red broadcasting system. I mean, these are simulations all derived from the science. And this is how wondrous and wonderful biology is. The problem is we can't show it to you any other way. And so really with this textbook, it's basic biology. It's supposed to engage and it captivates school kids and to bring them in and give them the vocabulary to be able to speak to any of the scientists here and have some sense of the work that goes on here. And with that, I will stop. So thank you.
Thanks, Drew. That was wonderful. And it is such an exciting project to see staff at the Institute collaborating with some of the great names in biology education and organisations like Apple. So well done to you and your team. It just remains me now just to thank a few people. I'd like to thank the President of the Board, Leon Davis, and the whole Board for their support during the year. I'd like to thank Murray and Maureen O'Keefe, our COO, again for their support, and especially my Assistant Director, David Vo, who does such a wonderful job at the Institute. And finally, again, thank you to all the staff and students, and thank you to our members and supporters for making 2011-12 such a wonderful year for the Institute. Thanks.